she died. And I didn't even cry, not a single tear. So if you can expel that thought from your mind.
When David, the rising pop star, first broke down his deep lyrics, he brushed them off as nothing more than metaphors. Ain't no real talk, he claimed. But now the world is asking, what happens when lyrics about death and violence suddenly line up with a real-life investigation? The discovery of a body linked to David's abandoned Tesla has flipped everything upside down, and the game is no longer the same. On September 9, 2025, Los Angeles police made one of the most shocking discoveries in recent memory. Workers at a Hollywood impound lot reported a foul odor coming from a white Tesla Model 3, and what investigators uncovered sent shockwaves across the globe. Hours later, the Los Angeles County Medical Examiner confirmed the remains belonged to Celeste Rivas, an aspiring influencer who had vanished more than a year earlier. The car, registered to none other than 20-year-old singer David Anthony Burke, known simply as David, the viral sensation behind Romantic Homicide and Here With Me. With more than 33 million monthly Spotify listeners, this wasn't just a star on the rise anymore. This was a household name suddenly at the center of a homicide investigation. The LAPD quickly launched a full-scale probe, but the question still haunts everyone. How did Celeste end up tied to David's car? The Tesla had been abandoned in the Hollywood Hills and impounded only days before, raising suspicions that the whole situation had been staged to buy time. Early forensics indicated the remains had been hidden in the vehicle before it was towed, and investigators began digging into every connection between David and the victim. One detail immediately raised eyebrows. Celeste was known to have a small "shh" tattoo on her finger, the very same design David himself later inked. To fans, that wasn't coincidence. It was proof of a disturbing personal link.
It doesn't feel real. I'm kind of in disbelief still. I don't know if it's a lot.
As the news exploded across social media, David's career began collapsing in real time. Shows were abruptly cancelled, brand collaborations dissolved overnight, and sneaker and clothing deals evaporated as partners scrambled to distance themselves. Billboard confirmed the cancellation of his Seattle tour stop on September 12th, just 3 days after the discovery, marking the start of a domino effect that would wipe out his live performances. The backlash only got louder when online investigators began revisiting David's lyrics. Lines once dismissed as moody teenage poetry suddenly sounded chillingly prophetic. His breakout hit Romantic Homicide included the haunting words, "In the back of my mind, you died, and I didn't even cry." At the time, listeners took it as heartbreak drama. But now, fans are convinced David had been hiding his darkest truths in plain sight, coded into the very songs that made him famous. In the back of my mind, I killed you. At first, fans thought these words were nothing more than poetic angst, but now they read like a chilling confession. The controversy exploded even further when an unreleased track titled Celeste surfaced online, allegedly recorded in December 2023. The song directly names her, with David crooning, "Oh Celeste, the girl with my name tattooed on her chest, I'm obsessed." Suddenly, this wasn't just art. It was being treated like evidence. The LAPD has kept their statements careful, confirming that the Tesla linked to David contained human remains, but stopping short of calling him a suspect. A spokesperson emphasized he is fully cooperating with detectives. But cooperation doesn't erase suspicion, and it doesn't explain the chilling coincidences, the tattoos, the obsessive lyrics, and the testimony of those who insist there was a personal link. The timeline only raises more questions. In April 2024, Celeste disappeared from her hometown in California, with her family reporting her missing after she failed to return home. Leads dried up fast, leaving the case cold for more than a year. Then, between August and September 2025, David filed a stolen vehicle report for his Tesla, claiming it vanished while he was on tour. On September 3rd, the car was spotted abandoned in the Hollywood Hills and towed to an impound lot. By September 8th, workers noticed a foul odor, triggering the discovery that would set the internet ablaze. ABC News confirmed the identification on September 17th, shocking the world. But this chain of events left massive gaps. If the Tesla was really stolen, who was behind the wheel? Was Celeste's body hidden inside before or after the so-called theft? And why was the vehicle abandoned in such a high-profile neighborhood for days before anyone impounded it? Online investigators have been tearing apart these questions non-stop, and to them, the leaks remain the most damning piece of evidence yet. Screenshots and alleged Discord logs point to conversations between David and Celeste, suggesting a close relationship that blurred dangerous lines. Photos, too, are circulating, though none have been authenticated by police. Media outlets like TMZ reported on the claims, which only fueled the fire, even without hard forensic proof. Critics say these receipts show a disturbing pattern, while defenders argue they could easily be manipulated. And then there's the Celeste track itself. Lyrics like, "Smell her on my clothes, like cigarettes. I hear her voice each time I take a breath." For fans, those lines connect uncomfortably well to the tragic discovery. Genius even published the leaked lyrics, giving them even more visibility and legitimacy online. The eerie timing only made matters worse. Viral posts falsely claimed the release of Romantic Homicide lined up with Celeste's birthday. Even after outlets like Hindustan Times debunked it, the rumor stuck. Because once the internet believes something, it's nearly impossible to shake. Now public opinion is sharply divided. On one side, people insist the evidence points unmistakably toward David's guilt. On the other, die-hard fans are convinced this is sabotage, a setup, or the result of manipulated leaks designed to destroy a rising star. Either way, the scandal has left David's career and reputation hanging by a thread. The internet has split into two fierce camps, and the divide is only getting louder. The first group points to what they see as undeniable evidence. The Tesla registered directly in David's name, the victim's family identifying him as someone she was close to, the matching tattoos, and the songs laced with death and obsession. For them, this isn't coincidence. It's a disturbing pattern. The second camp, however, isn't buying it. They stress the fact that David hasn't been formally charged, highlight his full cooperation with police, and point to his claim that the Tesla was reported stolen while he was on tour. To them, this is starting to look like a frame job, with someone deliberately planting evidence to ruin him. They argue that until police produce airtight forensic proof, guilt remains speculation. This split echoes other infamous cases where music and alleged crime collided. And just like those past scandals, legal analysts are already drawing out what could happen if prosecutors decide to pursue David. Charges could escalate fast if links are proven. From serious violent offenses to obstruction, conspiracy, or other felonies tied to the cover-up. California law is crystal clear. Convictions for violent crimes can carry decades behind bars, or even life sentences in the harshest cases. The stakes here aren't just about headlines, they're about freedom, reputation, and legacy. Even without a conviction, David's career is already in shambles. The New York Post reported his streaming numbers fell nearly 40% in a matter of days. Brand partnerships were torched instantly. Crocs, Hollister, and other collaborators cut ties overnight. Meanwhile, hashtags like "Your Justice for Celeste" trend daily, with millions demanding answers. His old music, once praised as dark and raw artistry, is now being picked apart for sinister undertones that sound more like warnings than metaphors. Celeste's story has now become bigger than one case. It's a rallying cry. Advocates for victims, families of the missing, and watchdog groups are using her name as a symbol of how quickly fame, secrecy, and power can silence the vulnerable. Outlets like ABC7 have spotlighted her case as proof that digital age disappearances can too easily be ignored until tragedy drags them back into view. No matter how this ends, cultural memory is going to link David and Celeste forever.
I went on my phone the next day, I was like, how to make music on iPhone. That was it. Apple earbuds, no mic, no headphones either.
At the center of all this sits David's breakout single, Romantic Homicide, the track that made him a household name. Released in July 2022, it became his signature, a viral anthem that carried him into stardom. Since then, David has insisted in countless interviews that the lyrics weren't real, that they were metaphors and artistic perspectives, not lived experience. But the problem? Those very interviews are now being dissected line by line, with fans saying he contradicted himself more than once. Take his 2023 sit-down on The Zach Sang Show. David admitted that much of his music came from imagined perspectives rather than his own life. He even downplayed his artistry, saying he wasn't even really a singer, just a gamer who stumbled into music trying to make background tracks for Fortnite montages. His so-called breakout moment, he revealed, came from lo-fi recordings made in his sister's closet on a borrowed iPhone. At the time, it sounded like a humble origin story. Now, critics are questioning if it was just part of a carefully constructed mask hiding something darker.
Romantic homicide. Dark, but also light at the same time, correct? Where does that come from? Because you're 17.
Word.
Have you been in love?
I don't know. I'm still trying to figure that out, to be honest.
Headphones on or off, the impact of romantic homicide still cuts deep. Looking back, its chorus became the defining line, interpreted by countless fans as a declaration of emotional numbness toward the end of a relationship. What once seemed like metaphor now feels like a coded warning, and that haunting ambiguity has only fueled the storm around David. At the time, David insisted it was all metaphor, presenting himself as an observer, channeling stories rather than confessing his own reality. But here's the problem. His own interviews are full of contradictions. In one moment, he distances himself completely from the song, insisting it was fiction. Then later, in the very same conversation, he admits the lyrics did come from a real emotional context in his personal life. That contradiction has become Exhibit A for fans who say he was playing a dangerous game of hiding in plain sight. Critics and fans alike jumped on the paradox. On the one hand, David claimed romantic homicide was nothing but projection and storytelling. On the other, he openly described being emotionally detached in relationships, an attitude that eerily mirrors the song's central theme of indifference toward a partner's imagined death. This blurred line between persona and autobiography is now front and center, shaping how the public interprets both his art and his alleged actions. The recording process only added to the aura. David often bragged that the song was recorded cheaply and spontaneously, just raw vocals and lo-fi grit. Fans embraced that roughness as authenticity, believing they were hearing unfiltered emotion. But the lyrics themselves? They fixated on separation, rejection, and cold, emotional desensitization. The second verse included the most controversial line, and when pressed on it, David brushed it off, framing it as symbolic of ending a relationship mentally before it physically ended. Still, his dismissals failed to silence the debates. That ambiguity became the gasoline that pushed the song viral. Critics highlighted how the direct invocation of homicide, juxtaposed with stripped-down indie pop production, gave the track an unsettling quality that made it stand out from every other breakup ballad of its time. What once got praised as edgy and universal is now being re-examined under a much darker light. At the peak of its acclaim, outlets like Pitchfork hailed it as a bedroom pop anthem that captured the void of emotional detachment. But even those glowing reviews noted the stark language of death and killing was unusually severe for the genre. In hindsight, fans say the warning signs were there all along, they just didn't want to believe them. In one revealing exchange, David was asked directly whether he worried his lyrics were just too dark. He brushed it off, insisting that his art was purely instinctive, not carefully plotted, positioning himself as nothing more than a vessel for raw emotions, not a strategist of disturbing imagery. Yet even at the peak of its TikTok virality in late 2022, when Romantic Homicide was soundtracking more than 1 million videos, questions were bubbling beneath the surface. Fans used it for breakup edits and romantic montages, but a vocal minority online pointed out the disturbing undertones of celebrating imagined death in a romantic context. The same interview also peeled back layers of David's artistic persona. He described himself as an observer, someone who collected emotions from others and channeled them into music, building deliberate distance between his personal life and his lyrics. But when pressed harder about the raw emotional intensity of Romantic Homicide, David contradicted himself. He admitted the song did come from a very specific psychological state, one marked by numbness, detachment, and isolation from genuine human connection. That contradiction has now been dragged into the spotlight as central evidence in the scandal swirling around him. Critics argue that David's own words hint at a psychological profile capable of indifference, even in the face of extreme acts. They suggest this emotional void could match someone able to carry out violence without remorse. Supporters, however, push back, claiming that emotional numbness is common among artists, especially those battling trauma or depression. They warn that linking creative expression to criminal behavior is a dangerous leap, but in the court of public opinion, nuance rarely survives. The interview didn't stop there. David also opened up about his complicated relationship with sudden fame and his exploding fan base. He admitted he felt overwhelmed by the non-stop attention and struggled to maintain real connections outside of music. For investigators and fans alike, this adds a disturbing layer. Was his emotional detachment spilling over from art into his real relationships? And what did that mean for his alleged connection to Celeste? Most unsettling of all was his acknowledgement of how his lyrics could be received. When asked point-blank about the violent imagery in Romantic Homicide, David admitted he knew listeners might find the content disturbing. His defense, that the lyrics simply reflected his feelings in the moment, came across to some as remarkably naive, and to others as a calculated move to normalize dangerous ideas under the veil of romance. After the discovery tied to his Tesla, those words now sound less like artistic musings and more like a chilling blueprint. Online discourse has completely flipped the meaning of romantic homicide. What was once hailed as a moody metaphor is now being reinterpreted as a straight-up confession in disguise. The scandal has turned the song into one of the most striking examples of how art gets recontextualized after a fall from grace. The moment news broke, clips of Romantic Homicide surged across TikTok and X, paired side by side with breaking headlines about David's alleged involvement. On Reddit and YouTube, commentary channels pieced together old interviews, pointing out the contradictions in his explanations, sometimes denying it was personal, other times admitting it reflected his emotional numbness. Those contradictions became the lifeblood of viral theories. Fans began speculating that the timing of the song's release wasn't random at all, but part of a pattern, a dark continuum of tracks secretly tied to Celeste. In these narratives, the song stopped being art and was instead reframed as a coded confession that nobody noticed until it was too late. Even music journalists couldn't ignore it. Billboard once praised Romantic Homicide as the ultimate viral success story, but in the wake of the scandal, op-eds slammed the industry for ignoring red flags. Critics argued platforms like TikTok played a huge role in pushing lyrics about killing a lover into the mainstream without questioning the implications. What once felt like edgy poetry suddenly looked reckless and dangerous. The backlash grew louder by mid-2025 as commentary shifted from interpretation to condemnation. Critics claimed that regardless of David's intent, the sheer popularity of Romantic Homicide had normalized romanticized death for an entire generation of young listeners. The fact that millions used it for breakup edits and love montages only made it worse. Proof, they argued, that dark messages were being dressed up as relatable content. This recontextualization shows just how fragile artistic legacy can be. A song that started as raw and relatable is now viewed as incriminating evidence in the court of public opinion. David's contradictory interviews, swinging between denial and quiet admission, have become ammunition for both his accusers and his defenders. But no amount of defense has restored the innocence of the track. Now, instead of being remembered as a viral anthem, Romantic Homicide has been recast as Exhibit A in a case of suspicion. And this isn't the first time the music world has seen this pattern. The discovery tied to David's Tesla has drawn comparisons to past scandals where artists' lyrics about violence suddenly collided with their personal lives. These parallels, while not identical, reveal a disturbing overlap between celebrity personas, obsessive lyrics, and allegations of control or death. The spotlight doesn't just magnify their fame, it magnifies the horror when fantasy and reality collide. On December 8, 2014, Los Angeles police responded to a chilling 911 call at the Palazzo East luxury complex. Inside, rapper Earl Hayes, 34, and his partner Stephanie Mosley, 30, an acclaimed dancer and actress, were both found dead. Investigators determined the tragedy was a murder-suicide, with Hayes pulling the trigger before turning the gun on himself. The shocking twist? Hayes was allegedly on FaceTime with Floyd Mayweather in the moments leading up to the act. Reports claim Hayes confronted Mosley about suspected infidelity during the call, while Mayweather desperately tried to calm him down. But before the call ended, it was too late. The fallout shook the industry. Mosley's death devastated the dance world, as she had performed with stars like Chris Brown and Britney Spears. Meanwhile, Hayes' name became forever linked to domestic violence, leaving a dark stain not only on his legacy, but also on Mayweather's inner circle and the hip-hop community at large. Fast forward to January 1st, 2022, another devastating case gripped Los Angeles. Deputies responded to a Temple City home where 27-year-old rapper Justin Joseph, better known as Jay Tash, and his girlfriend Jeanette Gallegos, also 27, were found dead in what investigators confirmed as a murder-suicide. Even more heartbreaking, her 3 young children were inside the home during the incident, though thankfully unharmed. Family members later revealed Gallegos had been planning to leave the relationship, and prosecutors highlighted a troubling history of abuse. The case reignited fierce debates about the normalization of violence in rap culture versus its devastating reality. Jay Tash, affiliated with Rich Forever Music, built an image around wealth and bravado, but his legacy collapsed into a tragic symbol of control and destruction. For many observers, the contrast between Gallegos' dedication as a mother and Joseph's violent end became a painful reminder of the dangers women face in toxic relationships with powerful men. And then came another case that rattled Florida's rap scene. Tampa rapper Billy Bennett Adams III, stage name Ace NH, was acquitted in January 2023 of a double homicide case tied to a 2020 shooting. But just days later, headlines erupted again. This time, Adams was arrested for the murder of his pregnant girlfriend, Alana Sims. On January 30th, Sims was found shot in Tampa near her SUV, where her toddler was discovered asleep inside the vehicle. Prosecutors alleged Adams lured Sims there under the guise of celebrating his legal victory, only to turn the night into tragedy after refusing to accept her pregnancy. The unborn child also did not survive. These chilling cases, while different, all highlight disturbing parallels. The way lyrics glorifying obsession, violence, and control sometimes blur too closely with real-life outcomes. They force the industry and fans to ask, when does the performance of bravado stop being art and start exposing something much darker? Adams was officially charged with first-degree murder and now sits behind bars awaiting trial. His case has become a chilling symbol of escalation, going from acquittal in one violent case to being accused of another, even more intimate crime almost immediately after. Critics argue this shows how legal gaps let dangerous patterns continue until it's too late. And Adams isn't the only one making headlines. New Orleans rapper Justin Lewis, better known as Suave Lyricist, has been accused of killing 2 women years apart. In 2017, his ex-wife, Rain Harris, was found dead under suspicious circumstances. Though family members pointed fingers, no charges were filed at the time. But in 2023, when his pregnant ex-girlfriend Aisha Hurd was discovered shot multiple times in Baton Rouge, prosecutors moved fast. Lewis was arrested and charged with second-degree murder, with investigators highlighting the disturbing similarities between Hurd's killing and Harris's death as evidence of a violent pattern. Community leaders say Lewis represents a bigger failure, that repeat offenders often slip through the cracks until multiple women are gone. His arrest has reignited debates about how often the system waits for tragedy to strike twice before acting. The cycle doesn't stop there. In Detroit, local rap veteran Super MC was arrested in March 2024 for the murder of his girlfriend, Briar White. What makes this case even more heartbreaking is the fact that Briar was a well-known domestic violence activist who dedicated her life to fighting the very issue that ultimately claimed her own life. Prosecutors allege the fatal incident happened during an argument in their Highland Park home. For Detroit, the case became a devastating symbol of how even outspoken advocates can still be left unprotected in the face of escalating violence. Meanwhile, in Los Angeles, Robert Camus' story shocked the community. His girlfriend, Amanda Custer, vanished in 2019 after neighbors reported a violent dispute. Witnesses claimed they saw her being forced into his Jeep, but despite intense searches, her body was never found. Prosecutors nevertheless charged Camus with capital murder, leaning heavily on his violent history, and most chillingly, on lyrics from his own performances. Disturbingly, he had once rapped about harming a girlfriend and burying her body, a performance that resurfaced online and bolstered the case against him. For many, it was another disturbing example of life imitating art in the darkest way possible. And the list goes on. In 2014, DJ and rapper affiliate Andre Pugh, known as DJ Awesome, was convicted of arranging the murder of his wife, Tiffany Jackson Pugh, in order to cash in on her life insurance. Prosecutors built their case using phone records, financial documents, and damning witness testimony. Tiffany's tragic death became a case study in how greed and financial pressure can twist into fatal betrayal. One of the most infamous stories in rap history remains that of Antron Singleton, better known as Big Lurch. In 2002, Singleton brutally killed his roommate Tanisha in a case that became one of the most notorious examples of rap lyrics, violence, and horror colliding. His name is now forever tied to one of the darkest scandals in hip-hop history, a grim reminder of how fame and self-destruction can spiral completely out of control. These cases show a grim pattern repeating again and again, hip-hop's success stories colliding with cycles of violence, obsession, and tragedy. And every time it happens, the industry is forced to reckon with the same haunting question: how much of this chaos was foreshadowed in the music itself? They say that under the influence of drugs, the killing carried out by Antron Singleton, better known as Big Lurch, was so brutal that it became one of the most infamous crimes in rap history. Convicted of first-degree murder and aggravated mayhem, Singleton was sentenced to life in prison without parole. His case didn't just horrify the public, it became a permanent emblem of the rap violence stereotype that critics of the genre never hesitate to amplify. For many, that crime marked a rock-bottom moment, a grotesque act that cast a shadow over every artistic contribution Singleton had ever made. But Big Lurch wasn't the only headline maker. In 2013, up-and-coming rapper Aiden Diaz, stage name Challenger, strangled his girlfriend Gayla Retry during a heated argument. Prosecutors argued the act was premeditated, fueled by jealousy and a need for control. By 2014, Diaz was convicted of murder and sentenced to 35 years in prison. While the Challenger case didn't blow up nationally, it became part of Chicago's grim narrative, where gang-linked street rap repeatedly collided with intimate partner violence, bleeding into private lives in the worst possible way. And it didn't stop there. In 2024, Detroit police charged rapper Kaif Blake in another shocking case, accusing him of fatally stabbing his partner during a domestic dispute that spiraled out of control. Though details remain limited, local outlets reported his arraignment and the immediate shockwaves it sent through Detroit's hip-hop community. Blake's case mirrored that of Super MC, reinforcing a terrifying pattern of relationships ending violently among the city's rap figures. Viewed together, these cases form a disturbing parallel narrative to David's current scandal. Again and again, rappers' public personas as artists collide with private acts of violence behind closed doors. Some cases ended in swift convictions, others remain clouded in mystery, but the pattern is undeniable. Observers argue the lesson isn't that rap uniquely breeds violence. Domestic homicides happen across all communities. But when it's rappers, the visibility magnifies the horror tenfold. And when the violent acts overlap with lyrics about obsession, control, or death, the line between art and crime blurs in chilling ways. These blurred lines shape public memory, transforming songs into supposed confessions and legacies into cautionary tales. The truth is stark. For many of these artists, their names are no longer remembered for their music, but for the lives they destroyed. Their stories now sit as permanent warnings, reminders of how an industry too often stays silent on domestic violence until it's far too late. And that's exactly why David's situation feels so explosive. Should prosecutors move forward with charges against him, experts predict his trial wouldn't just be big, it would become one of the most publicized celebrity court cases of the decade. A scandal that could rewrite the intersection of music, crime, and fame forever. Jury selection alone would be a circus, given the global publicity surrounding David's case. Every potential juror would walk in already influenced by headlines, leaks, and viral TikToks. The evidence, experts say, will likely hinge on a chilling timeline. When exactly Celeste died, how long her remains sat hidden in that Tesla, and whether DNA, fingerprints, or digital records can tie David directly to the crime. If convicted, the consequences would be catastrophic. In California, murder charges can carry anywhere from 15 years to life, with even harsher enhancements when the crime involves a minor. Add in possible sex crime charges, and the penalties grow even heavier. Mandatory lifetime registration, restrictions, and essentially a de facto life sentence that ends any chance of a comeback. But even without a conviction, the damage is already written in stone. The court of public opinion can be far more brutal than the law itself. David has gone silent, canceling shows, ducking appearances, and retreating from social media. And in today's industry, brands and labels almost never reinstate partnerships once they've cut ties. His rapid rise has collapsed in mere weeks. The kid who once recorded tracks in his sister's closet before topping the Billboard charts now faces being remembered only in connection to scandal and tragedy. And the questions still hang heavy over everything. Who really killed Celeste? Why was her body hidden in David's car? Was he directly involved, or just caught in the crossfire of something darker, something bigger? Until the LAPD wraps their investigation, speculation will continue to dominate every timeline and every feed. But for fans, collaborators, and much of the general public, the verdict feels like it's already been delivered. The discovery of Celeste's body has rewritten David's story forever. Whether prosecutors bring charges or not, whether he's convicted or cleared, the phrase, "goodbye forever," may apply not to a courtroom sentence, but to his place in music, culture, and stardom. The fall from icon to cautionary tale has been breathtakingly fast, and the scars left on his name may never fade. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. See you on the next one.